everyone. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for stopping by today. In today's video, we are going to look at the crime of familicide and the Chris Watts murders. Familicide is defined as one family member who murders other members of their family. It's most often used to describe cases where a parent, typically the father, kills his wife and children. These cases are horrifying acts which can wipe out an entire family, leaving relatives, colleagues, and friends both stunned and confused. There are often no outward signs that were visible to suggest that anyone was in any danger, and that there was even a risk of an individual taking such horrific actions against their family. So it is a crime that is both, it invokes both horror and fascination in us. Familicide is commonly intertwined with the term family annihilator, and this just stems from the act itself of family annihilation. Criminologists have been conducting research into the phenomenon of familicide. So what are some of the key points that we look for when focusing on the profile of a family annihilator? Well, family annihilators are distinctive among murderers in that they typically have no previous history of criminal activity, and they likely have never even engaged in any mental health services in the past. So for all intents and purposes, they are loving husbands and good fathers who often hold good jobs and are viewed as very successful by the people that know them. Family annihilators are predominantly male in long-term relationships, and they do appear to their neighbors and friends that they are dedicated husbands and fathers. Researchers have identified some common areas which may be the causes of the family murders, such as a breakdown in family relationships, issues surrounding access to the children, money problems, financial hardship, separation or divorce, a loss of social status, and sometimes even mental illness. Researchers have come to distinguish family annihilators into four main types, and those are self-righteous, anomic, disappointed, and paranoid. So the self-righteous type will blame other people, typically their wives or estranged wives, for their downfall. The anomic type will feel humiliated by some type of external event, such as a bankruptcy. The disappointed type feels that they have been let down by their family and that their social status is crumbling around them. And the paranoid type feels as if their family is under some type of threat from outside of the family. And so to stave off the threat, that the perpetrator will take it upon himself to murder the family. So as we can see, the characteristics are very closely related to a man's ideas about his gender roles and his place within the family. Now, there are a variety of ways for men to be men, but what is happening with family annihilators is that the man who commits these murders has reached some sort of a tipping point about the things within the particular category under which he falls. So in the case of Chris Watts, I believe that he overlaps three of the categories, and those being self-righteous, anomic, and disappointed. Let's first look at the self-righteous category, where the man blames his wife for his downfall. These killers are executioners. They are never spontaneous. Their murders are well planned and very selective. They're not carried out in the heat of the moment or in a fit of rage. They're very methodical, and the murder is planned. In the Watts case, it is pretty evident that the murders were premeditated, not only by his own admission, but by the writing of that letter while he was in North Carolina, telling law enforcement to look at Shanann if anything happens to him and the children. He also blamed his wife for the murders of the children in his first confession, and he has actually continued to do so by proxy in the narrative that he's been putting out by his remaining family, and also by his many misguided admirers. Another key factor in this case is that he told law enforcement that he had an emotional conversation with Shanann, at which time she told him he would never see the children again. And by doing this, by telling law enforcement this, he was clearly placing blame on Shanann and painting himself as the victim who had been wronged by his wife because she was denying him access to the children. We also see him blame Shanann in many of his comments to law enforcement about how controlling she was, and that he couldn't even hang a picture, and describing her temper as going from 0 to 200, and relaying the story about her locking him out of the house early on in their relationship after an argument. Next, let's look at the category of anomic type of family annihilator. This is the man that feels humiliated by an external event in their life, such as a bankruptcy. Now, it cannot be ignored that in an estimated 95% of cases, the family annihilator is male and is the head of the household. And this traditional idea of the man providing for and looking after his family may be one of the factors that leads to the murders, in that he no longer feels as if he is meeting this role adequately. And it's often due to a breakdown in employment or finances. In the case of Chris Watts, we know that they had already gone through one bankruptcy, and they were well on their way to a second bankruptcy. The third category that I want to look at is the disappointed type of family annihilator, who feels that their family has let them down, as if his social standing is crumbling around him. Now, as we know, Chris Watts is very concerned with appearances, and he has a desperate need for approval from those around him. So I believe that his fragile ego would not allow for others to see him as anything other than the good husband and the wonderful father. And the mere thought of people finding out that he had been having an affair, and because of that, being thought of as a liar and a cheat, would have been something that he would be desperate to avoid. He would also not want the public to look at him as a man who would leave his pregnant wife and children for a mistress. I also believe that he was very disappointed by the realization that the children actually preferred Shanann over him. And that's evident in the story that he tells, that they would scream all the way home in the car after he would pick them up from childcare. They'd be screaming for Shanann. Now, in the case of Chris Watts, there has been much debate over the looming question of why he murdered his family. I believe that it is important for you to consider how critical a role shame played in the psyche of Watts. I believe that his shame led to his desire to sever the connection between himself and that which made him feel ashamed. Now, one of the ways a person can try to sever their connection to their shame is to hide their face and the characteristic look of shame, which would be the bowing of their head and lowering of their eyes could be observed. But that's not the only way of achieving a severing of this connection. Rather than hide, Watts instead decided to do away with his audience, which was his wife and his children. His shame resulted in his destructive, vengeful fury that he took on his family, that he enacted against his family. And this, in fact, is the most vivid illustration of a family annihilator. So in my opinion, Watts believed that if he could achieve freedom from shame, then he would be totally free. And he believed that his murders removed the problem. And he believed that he would no longer feel humiliated and no longer feel ashamed. But unfortunately for him, it didn't work out that way. In his attempt to avoid feelings of shame, he actually ended up completely exposed. We see this in his body language at the sentencing hearing. He sat with his head down, and he even appeared to be attempting to shrink down in his chair to make himself a smaller target, as if he wanted to disappear from the glare of being exposed in front of everyone for the monster that he is. To annihilate his entire family, he demonstrated a sense of ownership over his family, and he believed that he had the right to exert his ultimate control over them by being the judge, jury, and executioner of his wife and children. The psychological profile of a family annihilator is very complex, and research is continuing to discover more information about the kind of individuals and the circumstances which can lead to such horrific and tragic actions. This is a profile that appears to be quite different from familiar profiles of mass murderers and serial killers and spree killers. The family annihilator differs from them because there is an intimacy involved with the relationship between the perpetrator and the victims in this type of crime. Also, it's important to realize that warning signs, if any, are difficult to spot. And the modern day nature of families and individuals to keep their lives private and their troubles private and to themselves only adds to the shock factor when such an incident does take place. Unfortunately, what this means is that this type of crime and the death of an entire family will likely continue to happen. And it is a phenomenon which has proved to be very difficult to predict and almost impossible to stop. So thank you so much for watching today. I really appreciate your support. Till next time, bye-bye.